Designing Organizations for the AI Age. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Nancy Giordano, strategic futurist and founder of Play Big Inc. Welcome, Nancy.
Hey, how are you?
So give us a brief summary of your professional resume and your background.
It's a funny thing to summarize for this work is non-traditional, but the way I just describe it as a strategic futurist. So in the quickest way possible is I help leaders, organizations, audiences, and groups better understand what the future needs and expects from us and build a path in which they can create and contribute something really relevantly toward it.
Among several things that you're doing at South by, you're a panelist for South by Southwest at 2019. And on one of the panels, the discussion topic is how AI will impact organizational structures. As a futurist, where do you see AI emerging, and where can we expect it to go right now?
Well, it's an interesting question. So that panel in particular, I'm moderating, and I'm moderating with three extraordinary professionals that all have a sort of a technical bent, an enterprise bent, or a bit more of a research bent. And so it's great to get their perspectives, and they're very aligned, actually, when we start to talk about how organizations need to prepare for an artificial intelligence future. And the reason I'm really excited about this is Kung Fu AI is a startup in Austin that's building really, discrete, pragmatic applications. And there's something so tangible about that. When we talk about AI, it always seems so big, and it's like whether or not it can take over, and not just our jobs but our minds. And these solutions are actually very discrete and very practical and tangible, and yet they have big implications and ripple effects throughout an organization. And so what we're trying to help organizations say is we're just at the very beginning of that S curve. It's only going to get faster and move more steeply. And so how do we prepare? And then how our organizations then transformed as a result? You know what I mean? Like, it's not just about that you just buy a product and you install it. It has all kinds of, again, cascading effects inside an organization in order to be able to use this successfully.
Compiling data sets, crafting algorithms, training the machine all take lots of time, talent, and obviously money. How can smaller businesses generate revenue from AI?
Well, I think that's one of the really great things that we get to talk about here is that, there are, in the topic of organizational readiness, it's like whether or not, data becomes a really big part of it, how we collect it, how structured or not structured it is, whether or not we have enough. And there's often a myth that you need to have huge gargantuan amounts of data when you really don't, again, depending on the problem that you're trying to solve. We were also having a discussion actually with a client recently about, if you frame the question one way, you need it like, need this much time and this much money and this much data. If you frame it just slightly this way, suddenly it becomes much more accessible. It's sort of the different, I made the analogy about when you go into a home and you want more light. It's like the difference between, can I put, a lamp in here versus can I move the window 3 inches? Those are two very different ways of solving a problem. And I think the same thing when you go and apply something like AI, it being as clear as possible about what the impact is or what the result is that we're looking for, and then understanding what the right mechanisms are to bring that impact forward. And we're also having a big discussion about how you frame this so that there is impact. Often people are bringing these, one of the panelists is going to talk about, he is frustrated with organizations that do a lot of what he calls science experiments, kind of learn just to learn. And the reality is he really does want to drive it to impact. Mike Salvino has had a tremendous amount of experience doing this at Accenture and has great stories to tell about the, again, just huge impact that it's had on the organization in terms of profitability and efficiency and redeploying talent. So the second thing is, having the right talent inside the organization, both formally in terms of the data scientists and the engineers and the developers, but also informally in the types of people who can understand what the implications are and think systemically across an organization. A lot of solutions can be brought in, but it requires that this department speaks to this department, speaks to that department. Often we aren't set up that way. We're very siloed. And then the third big topic that often comes up, again, is the fear of transformation inside an organization where people feel like they're going to lose their jobs. And so how do we ensure that people feel as though this is something that holds them well, as opposed to something that's going to replace them? Because otherwise, unintentionally or intentionally, we sabotage the success of something. And these guys are all going to tell stories about the fact that this has actually done tremendous good inside organizations and frees people up to be able to take on other tasks and do other things. So it's, the way we're thinking about it, it's not designed to replace as much as it is to augment.
So how long will it take before we see ads for corporate AI ethics and bias officers? And what type of
Exactly.
training and experience should someone seek to get one of those types of jobs?
I don't know that we know the answers to all that yet. I think what we're trying to do is sort that out. And the ethics piece is a really huge piece. I worked for an artificial intelligence startup several years ago and was trying to build the culture and talent infrastructure for a company of the future. And this is a big part of what we talked about. There was an ethics advisory panel, formal panel with ethicists and theologians and et cetera. But we were trying to figure out how you design an ethics advisory practice inside the organization, because people are going to be exposed to code or be exposed to a question, be exposed to data, be exposed to whatever, and have that more spidey sense about whether or not this feels right or doesn't feel right. And how do we frame, because it's not like there's a rule book that will say that we'll be able to cover all experiences that someone's going to have, right? There's going to have to be a cultural understanding of this. And there's a societally, whether or not there'll be a digital code of ethics or some sort of other way in which we guide how we use a powerful technology like this. But in the absence of that, how do we create our own understanding and spine? And we've talked a lot about that inside Kung Fu AI in terms of knowing where that edge is, And I ask everyone that I ever get a chance to talk to about this work. And it's interesting to see who can see the edge and who can't, to be quite honest. Not everybody does.
No, but it's funny because as someone who's self-described as endlessly optimistic, what keeps you up at night regarding AI, privacy, and big data? And what else do you see that helps you maintain your optimism?
There's this interesting tension between the fear of AI and the tremendous potential that exists in AI. There's another great thinker in Austin called Amir Hussain, who's written a book called The Sentient Machine. And his big fear is so that we're so worried about it that we're actually not going to be able to harness the full power of AI, right? So when you start to think about personalized medicine, you start to think about whether or not we can predict earthquakes, when you start to imagine what it will look like in a city that's coordinated extraordinarily well with data, like that part gets exciting. I think that we often are putting old structures on top of new technology and haven't really thought through very well how to manage that. And so I'm very, very proactive in thinking about how we frame these questions, how we frame the use of technology. One of the things I talk a lot about in my keynotes is that we all deserve to be better held by each other, which has to do with, organizations and cultures of understanding and compassion and respect, by the systems we design, because often we have systems that are not working congruently or working at odds, and by the technologies that we design and we employ. And if we can have that framework where we're holding people well and serving them versus stalking them and empowering them versus exploiting them, then amazing things can happen. But unfortunately, we don't always have that mindset going in. So how do we ensure that we do? And there's tiny little micro actions. It's how you name an app. We were building an app at one point for a large bank to use for when they call a call center, and how you name that makes such a difference and signals how that app should be used. And it was interesting to see who wanted to pass the buck on that and who wanted to claim, the boundaries of it.
Interesting. Nancy Giordano, strategic futurist and founder of Play Big Inc. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out all that you're doing at South by Southwest, you've got quite a bit going on. How can they do that?
It is spread all over the place. I do have a website, playbiginc.com, and LinkedIn sort of gives the bio side of it. I'm trying to be active on Twitter at Nancy Giordano. But I will say, South by is an extraordinary opportunity to bring so many of these ideas and people forward. And so we're doing this panel on organizational readiness for AI. I'm doing a panel on science fiction and how it informs our confidence or our fear of the future, exactly the question you just raised. And then I'm doing another panel and discussion with a colleague of mine on if Mother Nature rebuilt the internet. And thinking, and then back to your question about optimism, that's the one, a decentralized net that allows us to hold on to our own data is a place where I'm really trying to build a lot more pathway to, because I think that will be the answer instead of trying to rejigger the ones we've got now. And then lastly, I'm building a career fair for the future for college and high school kids so that they have a chance to touch some of, again, this optimism and some of this opportunity that the future brings, and they feel like they've got a place in it. Because we worry that kids right now feel a bit anxious about the future, and we want this to be a place where they get really excited about what's possible and think about their own capacities to contribute to it. So it'll be a fun week.
Yes, it will. Thanks again, Nancy. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tonyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.